Hey friends, welcome or welcome back. My name is Kim. This is Kim Reads and Reviews, and this video I am going to be talking about all the books that I had read in February and also January. We got a lot to catch up on. 2025 has been a whole bucket of meh, um, and either 1 stars and a whole ton of DNFs, except for 2 books. I've read 2 books that I thoroughly enjoyed pretty well, gave 4 stars or more, but aside from that, we got a lot to catch up on and talk about, so buckle up, I suppose. So the first book that I had read this year was Mame by Jessica George. I absolutely loved this book. It was the first book I read, and I think I'm on a 3-4 year streak where the first book that I read, I actually end up really enjoying. And by that, I mean like gave it 4 stars or more. So really great to see that I'm still on trend for that. Hopefully I don't jinx myself in 2026. But I do want to make a whole video talking about this book because I could talk about it for like 10 minutes or more very easily. But just so you know, I cried 3 times reading this book. It was great. Very great. So stay tuned for that video whenever I put that out. Now, I went from reading Mame to listening to The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden, and this was just not good. I don't go to her books thinking that I'm going to have like a 5-star read. I don't expect impeccable writing. I don't expect super atmospheric storytelling. That's not my expectations going into her books. I know they're popcorn thrillers or just something I can put on the background in the weekend when I'm doing chores. But this was just, I want to use the word dumb. But also, I don't want to use that word because, I know people like this book. It made it into the Goodreads Choice Awards for a reason. This was just not my jam, and I think that that's okay. We follow our female main character. She's traversing the dating scene, and there's a lot of highs and lows in the dating scene. She meets a guy, her new beau, but also there's a killer on the loose in the dating scene. Is her new beau the killer, or is he not? And so that's kind of it. I don't really care to go that much more in depth into the synopsis. I found, the writing to be very one-dimensional, lacked complete depth. It was suffice for like an audio listen, but yeah, not great writing. I feel like if I was reading it with my eyes, I would have DNF'd it. And listening to audiobooks, it's a little bit easier to finish them, even if I'm not enjoying them, because I can do other things. Whereas if I'm reading a book with my eyes, I have to dedicate time to sit down and like not doing other things. So I'm like, okay, if I'm reading a book with my eyes, I really got to make sure I'm enjoying it because I'm dedicating time to doing it. But anyways, so the main character that we're following along with in here, at the best of times, she was annoying. And then at the worst of times, she was just plain dumb. Truly. There was multiple points where I was listening to this and I just kind of kept thinking, like, in what world would a woman respond to this situation in this way? And I know that's not always fair to put on an author because it's a fiction book and obviously the plot has to progress in some way. But I just didn't find that it was very well crafted. I found that the twist was okay. Like, I didn't really predict the twist, but just because I couldn't predict the twist doesn't mean that I was like, oh, this makes sense. Like, it's all piecing together. No, it was kind of like, what? Like, and then even the execution of that twist, like the way that the book had ended, I found to be very kind of like slap jobby, if you will, kind of just like she threw it together and then was like, there, call it a day. That's a book. There's better popcorn thrillers out there for sure. Also, if you see me touching my bangs a lot, yeah, that's a thing. I had just gotten curtain bangs and I'm still trying to figure out how to, one, style them and then just like wear them so they aren't bugging me too much. I really like the Sabrina Carpenter type of curtain bangs that she has going on, and so I tried to do that, but anyways, just don't draw attention to it. Okay, I'm drawing attention to it. Anyways, I listened to that. I had also read 13 Ways to Kill Lulabelle Rock in January. This was disappointing. I was really excited for this book. The premise of it is really cool. There's Lulabelle Rock and she has 13 clones and she hires the 13th clone to go and kill all the other ones. So that premise alone sounds really cool and very unique. Unfortunately, that was that was kind of the most exciting part about it. I didn't really quite know what to expect going in, but with a premise like that, I was kind of hoping for something like a little bit more. But essentially, each chapter we follow along with the clone as she's finding one of the other clones and trying to kill them. If you're into tarot cards, I think you'd like this because at the beginning of each chapter, there's a tarot card description. And I'm not into tarot cards or know the specifics behind everything or the symbolism behind all of them. But that is something that was kind of explained at the beginning of each chapter. I don't know. I just found that this was okay. I gave it 3 stars because I didn't love it, but I also didn't hate it. It was fine. I finished listening to it on audio. Like I read most of it with my eyes and then finished it up on audio because I just didn't want to dedicate the time to sitting down and reading it anymore with my eyes. But I was curious to see how it was going to end. So there's that. The Only Survivors by Megan Miranda. So this one has quite the long and convoluted synopsis a little bit, but really all you need to know is that there were 9 students who survived a bus crash like over 10 years ago when they were in high school. And they promise each other to meet once a year. To one kind of like check in with each other, but also I think it was the year of the anniversary when they were like when the incident happened or something like that. So also as a way to kind of like check in with each other, keep each other safe and whatnot. But then one of the main character that we follow along with, she was like, this is the last year that she's meeting up with them because it's just keeping her grounded in history and she just wants to move on. But then, somebody from their group goes missing. There's a couple of people who have passed away over the years. And so, yeah, it's just kind of like what's going on kind of a situation. Like the writing in this was actually pretty decent. I really liked it. It was quite atmospheric. It kind of had this like tense tone to it all that I really appreciated, even between the characters. But I found that the pacing was a little bit off at times and that the descriptions that the author used was too much sometimes, like overly descriptive in certain parts and focused in on certain aspects of the story. I found a little bit too much at the end of it. And we were zeroing in on certain details or portions of the story where I was like, okay, that must contribute to kind of like the mystery of it all and what's going on. It must be incorporated in some way. And turns out it really wasn't. So I was kind of like, was that supposed to be a red herring? Like, I didn't really find it to be an effective red herring. I kind of was like, why did we spend 50 pages diving into this aspect of the story when we could have been fleshing out other aspects of it a little bit more? I would say that this is more a suspense than a thriller. So, if you're interested in picking this up, know that going into it so you can kind of like manage your expectations as far as the pacing of it goes. And this was another one where I just kind of felt that the twist was loosely strung together, more so than like what I was saying with The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. This one for sure, I was kind of like, okay, sure. The reasoning behind everything wasn't really concrete enough for me to like stand on and confidently be like, oh yeah, this is just like, this all makes sense. It all fits perfectly together. Because I just didn't really find that it did personally, but I think this was my first Megan Miranda, I think. So I am interested to read more from her because I did really like her writing quite a bit. I feel like the twistiness that was in The Boyfriend, I wish was replicated in The Only Survivors. But again, this is kind of more of a suspense than a thriller. So it is what it is. I gave it 3.5 purely because I was like, I enjoyed the writing. That was probably the one part of it that I felt most strongly that I was like, yeah, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed this bit of it. But the twist itself and for what it was, I just thought it was fine. In the Event of Love by Courtney Kay. So this is a holiday romance. Obviously, I know I read this in February. It is not the holiday season, but I just wanted a bit of a palate cleanser. I just wanted something very unserious and something that could kind of like restart my mood reading a little bit, because like I just didn't really know what direction I wanted to go in after reading the Megan Miranda books. I was like, all right. Before this, I had DNF'd a ton of books, which I will go over eventually. Maybe again, still deciding if I even want to talk about those books. And I was just like, I just need something to just to cleanse the palate a little bit. And romances are normally those books for me. So picked this up, and overall, I enjoyed this. I gave this 3 stars. We follow Morgan, and she's an event planner in LA, and something happens where she needs to take some time off. So she decides that she's going to go back to her hometown. And while she's there, she's also going to plan an event in order to help aid her obtaining a promotion. She's somebody who just does not go back home ever. She isn't really close with her dad. She isn't really close with all of her friends or anybody really there. She has unhappy memories. And so the reader doesn't really quite know what those unhappy memories are for quite a good portion of the book. But she goes back to the town. She encounters Reed, who was her one-time best friend turned crush. And Reed and Morgan end up kind of rebuilding their connection with each other. I will say that if you don't like miscommunication in your romances, if you actually loathe miscommunication, don't read this, because this was most of what the book was. And the reason that Morgan didn't want to go back home to her small town, or like, read the whole situation between the two of them, was purely based on assumptions that Morgan was making however many years ago when she was still living in the small town. Like, she made assumptions about her dad, she made assumptions about Reed, all of which were incorrect. And then she just responded to those assumptions accordingly and like uprooted her life and went away. And meanwhile, the people are like, that's not what happened at all. Like, that's not why, I was quiet, or why I was sad, or whatever. So in some ways I found the main character Morgan to be a little bit immature, so it made it hard for me to root for her necessarily. I think that this is technically like an enemies to lovers, and the enemies piece was like very loose. Like, it's basically 50 pages of the book, and then, they're lovers. Anyways, I thought it was cute. The ending was extremely cheesy, but it worked. It did what it needed to do for me, which was cleanse my palate. The most recent book that I had read was Talking at Night by Claire Daverly. This is it's a literary fiction about Rose and Will, and they meet when they're in high school, and immediately feel very gravitated towards one another. They meet at like a bonfire one night with all their friends, and especially Will, like, he's very gravitated towards Rose, and neither one of them can pinpoint why, because they're very different from each other. But they both kind of call it out right away. Like, they're like, I don't really quite know what this is, but like, let's just kind of dig into it. Like, not even really like a physical attraction, more of like an emotional and mental attraction towards one another. Obviously there's physical attraction, but what's described throughout the book and what's written so well, I found, was that yearning, that mental, emotional, and obviously physical yearning too, but just the way that it was like written was so well done. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I found the writing to be impeccable, honestly. It flowed so well, and I was so invested in Rose and Will's story. At no point did I feel that there was like any kind of lull. I was invested in each of them as a person, independently from each other, and also invested in seeing them be together as like a couple, and just seeing them go through their stories. And it does this thing that I really enjoy in books, where the beginning half of the book is there's 3 separate timelines. I don't want to give anything away, but anyways, there's 3 separate timelines and 3 different parts of their life, and you see both of them in each of those parts. So I really like that quite a bit. I will say that this is not a full 5 stars from me, because for probably 40% of this book, I was getting very, very strong normal people vibes. Like, I honestly was like, oh, this is so similar to normal people in some ways. Just with not necessarily a setup, but like these 2 characters kind of maybe not communicating the best with each other. Though I will say that these 2 characters communicate better than the 2 characters did in Normal People. But, nonetheless, it was just very, very similar. And I couldn't help comparing the two in my head as I was reading it. And I did really enjoy Normal People. I think I gave it four stars or so as well. So, great. And then eventually, as I kept reading the book, it was very distinct and of itself and independent of Normal People thereafter. But it did take me a bit to kind of make that mental adjustment, I suppose. Overall, really liked it. Would definitely recommend. I don't know. I like to see yearning between two characters, two love interests. I just want to see them pine over each other before a kiss. And when they finally do kind of like kiss or get together, like, oh my goodness, I was the equivalent of like kind of kicking my feet a bit. So yeah, I definitely recommend the book for sure. It was so well done and flows so well. Oh, I will say, if you are interested in picking up, do know that there are no quotation marks, which is also something where I was like in my head comparing it to Sally Rooney a bit. I just couldn't get it out of my mind, unfortunately. But I know some people get really hung up on the no quotation marks thing. So if that's you, don't bother pick this up. I've DNF 4 books this year, so that's like 2 books a month, which I'm not necessarily mad about. I think DNFing, will help me get through kind of like this semi-reading slump that I'm in at this point. I just don't want to mess around with it this year. I'm just going to be more into DNFing. And honestly, looking back at all these books I've DNF'd, I don't regret DNFing any of them. I'm not gravitated towards any of them again. I'm not wanting to pick them up. There are 2 books here where, The Idea of You and The Bookshop of Second Chances, I didn't enjoy either one of these books. I got, I think, about halfway into The Idea of You, and then I think I got about 30% into The Bookshop of Second Chances, and I was just like, this is just like not, I just wasn't having a good time. Like, I felt, not passionately, but I definitely felt a certain kind of way about both of them. The Idea of You, I find, I don't know. I did not like the way that this was written, and it made me uncomfortable a little bit. So put that down. And then The Bookshop of Second Chances. This is one of the things it's shelved under is romance in here. And I could not get behind the male character in here. Like, he was just not a very good male character. I'm like, am I supposed to be rooting for these two to be together? I just didn't care to read it. I was over him. I was like, nothing about this is going well, even following along with the female main character, and I wasn't even really rooting for her. Oh, the whole thing I just was not liking. So I was like, I'm dedicating way too much time to reading this. Anyways, that's pretty much where that is at. The last time I posted on YouTube was a status update about Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I am a little over halfway it at this point. I don't know. It started off really well, and now I'm just kind of like feeling very middle of the road about it at this point. Like, if I were to give it a rating right here at this moment, I would give it a 3-star. Like, it's nothing great, nothing notable per se, and it's not bad. I'm enjoying the magic system. This has so much notoriety behind it, so I do feel kind of scared to DNF it a little bit, but like, I've read other books. Like, I've soft kind of like put this down for now and read other books because I'm like, there's something about this that is just not jiving with me. I don't know if it's the writing. I do find the writing to be a little bit simplistic, I guess. And the plot progression itself, like the pacing is pretty decent within this. It's just my investment in the overall story of what is going on is like, it's okay. It's middle of the road at this point. I'm not quite sure. I do kind of still want to finish it. I do, just to see what happens and how it all rounds out. But I do wish I had the audiobook available to me, and it's not available through my library without waiting 6 months or whatever ridiculous time, or through Everand. So I don't know. I don't really know. You guys let me know if you've read this and if you really like it, because I'm not quite sure how to feel about it, but I'm just not feeling gravitated towards it. And I feel like the only reason I'm like kind of hanging on to it is because of the notoriety the book has, which is not a reason to pick it back up. So yeah, in total this year, I've read 6 books, which in other months I've read 6 books, and I'm definitely not on track for the 1 book a week and reading 52 books this year, even though it's only 2 and a bit months in. So like, ultimately it's fine. Obviously, I'm sure I'll catch up if I want to. I think that's it that's all that's been going on in my world reading wise. It's nothing exciting. I told you it's nothing exciting, but here I am providing an update. I think I'm going to do a couple of reading vlogs just to kind of jumpstart my reading desire again. Talking at Night by Claire Daverly really kind of helped, because honestly, at one point, I think it was after I read 13 Ways to Kill Lulabelle Rock, I was like, do I even like reading? Like, which is not a good feeling, because like this is a hobby I do genuinely enjoy, even when I'm not enjoying it, you know? But it just feels different this year, and I don't know. Yeah. So anyways, I'm looking to get back on track. I have noticed that I am kind of doom scrolling a lot lately. And so I would like to swap doom scrolling time with actual reading time, because I do feel that that will help kind of jumpstart the way I'm feeling about everything. I think that that's pretty much all the updates I have for you. I hope your reading year is off to a much better start than mine. Feel free to comment down below what your favorite book was that you read in January and also in February. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope you're enjoying what you're reading, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.